Welcome to Inside the Sports Car Paddock on the Marshall Pruitt podcast, presented to you by Cooper Tires and our dear friends at the Justice Brothers. We have 4 folks for you this week, starting off with our usual, the awesome, the mighty Jeff Braun, a race engineer extraordinaire, talking about a little bit of personal stuff based on a listener request, following last week where we got into the various team members, how they work together in a sports car operation. Someone said, hey, I'd love to know how Jeff got into the world of race engineering. What was your path? Because honestly, it's a very different thing. There's no single way or necessarily, I would say, organized way. And so Jeff's path to becoming an elite race engineer very much along with that program of, hey, I'm not sure how I got here, but I did. So he shared that story with us. Then we got into, since the Long Beach Grand Prix is this weekend, and IMSA's Bubba Burger Grand Prix is going to be the focus of his world, both Friday and then Saturday when the race itself takes off later in the afternoon into early evening. Speaking about setups, what do you need to do for traffic on a street course where, boy, it is not just a normal make it go as quickly as possible type mindset for a race engineer. So got into that, and then also closed with speaking about how do you end up where you want to be in terms of street racing setups, really hitting that sweet spot towards the end of the stint, not just in the beginning or the middle and then taper off. After that, we move into Greg Gill, CEO of the World Challenge Series. I always struggle to remember its full name because it's gone from Pirelli World Challenge to SRO Blancpain World Challenge GT Americas, or some sort of assembly of those words. All kidding aside, spoke with Greg about shift for them. What they have at Long Beach this weekend is going to be their full GT4 field in a sprint race format instead of the usual big bangers with GT3 and their predecessors just the own World Challenge GT category that once existed that I loved and worked in for a little while. So start off with Jeff, then move into Greg talking about this weekend and some interesting policy shifts they're looking at that I criticized the World Challenge Series over a couple of years ago, mentioned to Greg in private, love you pal, but I'm not sure this is the right direction. And at least in this one regard, it sounds like they're going to change their approach. Then we close with 2 awesome interviews sent in by our friend My Week in Sports Cars co-pilot Graham Goodwin, who is in Europe right now. That makes sense since he is from Europe. But Graham right now sending 2 items in. First one with United Autosports team principal co-owner Richard Dean, talking about their ELMS and WEC 2019 plans, plus also offering more thoughts on only getting 1 entry at the 24 Hours of Le Mans at LMP2. Then we close with the crazy and awesome, all kinds of fun, Roman Rusinov on rebranding their championship-winning ELMS G-Drive racing effort as the AURUS 01, A-U-R-U-S, AURUS 01, and that happens to be the brand that supplies the Russian star limos for Russian Premier Vladimir Putin. So great stuff from Graham as usual. So we got Jeff, got Greg, Richard Dean, and close with Mr. Rusinov on this week's edition of Inside the Sports Car Paddock, brought to you by Cooper Tires and the Justice Brothers. Jeff Braun, we are back for Inside the Sports Car Paddock with our traditional start to the show with you. You feeling any pressure there being first up on deck, or now since we've done an even dozen, is this just old news?
I guess old news, but fun news. It's always fun to start out and talk to you every Sunday, Monday, whenever our paths get to cross when we're not on airplanes or at some racetrack.
Well, fair enough. So we had a request come in, since our topics are usually driven by our listeners. Had the couple of great things that came into you that we're going to get to after about street racing this weekend in particular. You and I will both be at Long Beach. You'll be trying to win the race, the IMSA DPI race overall with the Core Autosport Nissan on-road DPI. I had some folks asking about setup in terms of traffic consideration, also setting up a car to be good at the end of a run. And so we'll get to that second, because we had a request come in for you to continue really our conversation last week on the different roles and whatnot in motor racing within a sports car team, who comprises what, who does what, how do they interact. Kind of similar to that theme, someone said, hey, how did you get involved, Jeff? How did you become a race engineer? And I thought that might be a really great place to start, really from your start, because no one becomes a race engineer. First job in motor racing, off you go. It's usually some sort of learned or earned thing. Let's start where you started.
Sure. That's, yeah, you're right. There's a lot of people. I get emails from people in college right now. How do I be a race engineer? Well, I don't think there's really a path, but I'll tell you mine real quick, how I got there. Maybe it'll help. So my dad owned an insurance agency, so he was not in the business of car racing or anything, but he was kind of a car guy in the 60s. He had a Corvette Stingray and he liked cars. And we lived about an hour south of Road America. And so we'd go up there. He'd take me when I was a little kid up to the June Sprints, which at the time was like the big race, because all the factory cars would show up, the factory Corvettes with Hep Sharp and all of these guys driving. And so I was kind of got to see it at an early age. And then at one time my mom and dad were going to move into a new house, and we were looking at houses. I was a little kid. And all of a sudden, this one house we went to look at, they had a go-kart in the garage. And it turned out that there was a go-kart track right close to where we lived. And I wanted to buy the house because I thought the go-kart came with it. Well, turned out it didn't, but we talked to the family, and next thing you know, I'm out at the go-kart track, and we had a cart, and my dad was like, he's highly competitive, and he said, hey, all right, let's go practice. And I went to practice, and I did a day of practice, and I said, okay, we can race next weekend. There's a race on Sunday. And he goes, no, you're not going to race until you can break the track record for your class. So about 6 months later, after practicing 2 or 3 times a week, it seemed like, I got fast enough. We went to the first race, and I don't know if lucky enough, or it just was going to happen no matter what, because my dad was going to make sure. But anyway, won that race, and the hook was set, and that was it. So then I was going to be a professional race car driver, Formula One driver for sure.
Absolutely.
Guaranteed going to be a Formula One driver. Went to school, in grade school, didn't need any of this garbage English and math and history, because Formula One drivers don't need to know that. So did terrible in school. Even got held back in 5th grade, and I was terrible. But it didn't matter, because Formula One drivers didn't need that stuff. So racing karts and doing all of that. Finally got high school and discovered shop class and welding and drafting and machine shop, and I was like, oh, wow, so this is pretty cool. You can actually use this. I could actually apply this to my go-karts and my race cars and make them go faster. So I got super interested in school suddenly, and all the math courses were easy. All the physics courses were easy. It was just a piece of cake, because I was hooked. This could make me go faster. Anyway, it turned out after racing cars a little bit longer, wasn't going to be a Formula One driver. Now what do I do? Okay, well, I remember sitting one time under my Triumph Spitfire with the oil pan off, changing the rod bearings at a SCCA race when I was 18, I guess, just turned 18. And so I thought, wow, I wish I had time to change the rear anti-roll bar, because I know that would make it go faster. But I got to get my suit on and go drive this thing. I wish there was somebody else that could drive this thing so I could work on making it go faster. And that was it. I was like, okay, well, I'll stop driving and try to make cars go faster. And so maybe that was just a good excuse, because I wasn't talented enough as a driver, but it worked for me. So then college. Well, I can go to college. What do I want to do? Why do I want to do that? For only one reason: to learn stuff to make my race cars go faster.
I'm seeing a theme develop here, Jeff.
Right. There's a theme. So there was no, well, maybe I could get a job at, General Motors in their automotive department, or, designing street cars. No, it was, if it didn't help me somehow make my race cars go faster or other people's race cars go faster, I didn't care. So then this was the 80s, like early 80s when I graduated from college. And there were no data acquisition systems really in race cars at the time. The ones that were just the factories had some big giant recording boxes and stuff, but nobody was using it. But I could see that it was kind of coming, that this was going to be what was going to happen. And there really weren't race engineers at the time either. There were designers and crew chiefs, but race engineering was not really quite a thing yet. So I looked for, when in college, when you start to have companies come in and you can interview with them and they kind of do recruiting and stuff. And I was at the Milwaukee School of Engineering, which was a super intense engineering based school with lots of industry people coming to recruit the kids. And I was looking for something that I could somehow relate to race cars. And there was this company called Dresser Atlas, which was a oil field company, and they did logging of oil wells, where they stick these tools down an oil well I should say a hole in the ground that they hope to be an oil well. They stick these tools down there and they record all of these different sensors, like 100 different sensors, and they record it to try to figure out if there's oil in there and where the oil is. And it comes out in a graph with a bunch of squiggly lines. And I was like, wow, that's data acquisition. They're just acquiring data from a hole in the ground, not from a throttle position, steering, and brake. But if I could learn this, I might have something that nobody else has. And so did that, learned that, was able to take that into race cars when data acquisition first came in. And people in the Trans Am series, I got hired by a guy by the name of John Brumder, who was the first guy to take a chance on me as a race engineer because I knew data systems and nobody else knew how to run one. There were these big boxes about the size of a laptop, but it would record the throttle and the brake and the steering and the RPM. And then because of my background in racing, I knew how to not only run the system, but analyze what was happening and help John go faster in his race car. So that's how I got my first job in racing. And then it just pretty much progressed from there. The next big step was shock absorbers. I bought the second damper dyno from Kurt Rohrig that he ever built. And I thought, well, this is again the cutting edge. Nobody was taking dampers apart and trying to figure out how they worked or anything. And I bought a shock dyno from him. Well, actually, my dad bought it for me, and I paid him back over months and months to try to pay him back for the dyno. And I was doing people's shock absorbers for free just because, my deal was, you can send them to me. The only thing is you got to tell me the next week how they were different and where they were better and worse. And so I did lots of free dampers. I would do 4, 5, 6 sets a week for people and send them out and get the information back. And I tried to get better and better at understanding dampers. And that was a thing that made me unique, kind of like the data stuff back in the day. And
it's just getting you reps. I mean, and that's the other thing too, which is very important while we're talking about you on the pathway to becoming a young race engineer. It's okay. I'd love to say that I'm going to Indy 500 this weekend to engineer, the future race winner. But if you can go to that club race and help someone, quote, engineer their car. And if, depending on the classes running and maybe the time between those sessions, you might be able to help engineer 2 or 3 different cars. And it's just it's really a numbers game while you're learning. As you're pointing out, Jeff, hey, I'm sending off 4, 5, 6 sets of dampers each week or each weekend, just trying to learn myself and get data back from the folks. Hey, this worked, that didn't. It's the same thing in practice in the field of, while I'm trying to build this database to become good at what I do, the higher the frequency, it's going to help get you there faster.
That was exactly it, and then it was interesting. Then suddenly more people wanted their dampers done because the guys I was doing them for were beating the other guys. And it was like, wow, okay. Then I couldn't do enough anymore. So I said, well, I'll just charge something for this, and then that'll slow it down. And it actually kind of worked the other way. Then I got more work, so I charged more and more and more, and I learned more and more and more. And I remember going to Road America for I can't remember even what race it was, and it I must have been working with some teams that were in the like support event or something like that. And I remember seeing Carroll Smith. And of course I'd read all of his books and memorized everything and read them 10 times, and the pages had fallen out. So I bought new copies of his books, and, and there was Carroll Smith. Holy moly, it's Carroll Smith, man. I wonder if I could go talk to him. No, I'm too nervous. Oh, there he is again. Maybe I should just go up and say hi. And I was super nervous. It was like, I don't know, it would be like a young race car driver seeing Sebastian Vettel walk by, and you're like, oh, geez. And so I got up the courage, and I went up to Carroll Smith and said, Carroll Smith, hey, I'm Jeff Braun, and you don't know me. And he goes, you're that shock kid.
Huh.
And I'm like, what? And he goes, you're that guy doing all these shocks for all these guys. And he says, I don't really know that much about shocks. He said, you are really, you got this thing. This is great. He said, hey, I'm doing a test with a team next week at, I can't remember where, Groton. And he said, would you mind coming and helping me with the data system? Because I don't really know that much about data systems, and maybe helping these guys with their shocks, and you and I will work together. I was like, holy smokes. Are you kidding me? I get to go work with Carroll Smith. So then, to fast forward, we became really good friends, and he helped me kind of guide me through the whole race engineering thing and how you become a consulting race engineer, and how you get jobs, and how you structure your fees, and how you work with car owners and drivers with big egos and all of that. And he helped me kind of get going on that. And that was pretty much it. Been a consulting race engineer. And when I say consulting, a lot of times it's like you get a job. I worked for Team Scandia for 7 years. So it's not like on and off, like every other weekend you're with a different team. I was with that one team for 7 straight years, level 5 for 5 straight years. Been with Core for 5 years now. So, but I don't necessarily work in the shop every day with the guys in the shop, especially now with the internet and the communications we have. I can work from home and still be full time. I'm in my office 10, 12 hours a day working on now only stuff for Core, but still, kind of a freelance consulting engineer for a team like that.
I mentioned to, I believe it was Paul Tracy, however many years ago, that it's phenomenal to me how through his IndyCar career, I believe he represented every major tobacco company involved in the sport. And it was Marlboro, it was Brown and Williamson with Cool, it was Players. I might even be forgetting another brand. I love the Jeff Braun angle of folks you've worked for. We won't get into all this here, and it's just a fun thing. I've mentioned it to you, but the fact that you worked for many years for both Andy Evans, a person who at least externally is still waiting for lots of positive things to be said about them, and those things are a bit of a rarity. The fact that you worked forever with Andy Evans, someone who's generally hated by so many, and then you also have a really long stint with Scott Tucker in level 5. I'm not saying it's that PT kind of, hey, you've ticked all the boxes, but maybe there's some other scandal laden and or just unloved team owners that I need to learn about. But all I can say is you're clearly an angel, because it wasn't like you were there for 6 months and there was a big blow up. No, you were, part of the furniture, man. Whatever you do, it works, and you can get along with anybody. And I'm mentioning this as a little bit of comedy here, or humor, but we shouldn't underestimate that ability to work for and with folks who might not be. Some might be jerks. Some might be just bad people, all kinds of personalities that if you want to have a long career in engineering, which you have to have a personality that can bend, fit, slot in without being too reactionary to the character or quality of the person that you're working with. There's some folks who I've seen, and one of my mentors, brilliant engineer, just never suffered fools and has worked for more teams than anybody because he's good for about a year and a half, maybe 2, and then gets fired because he pops off, says something, rubs someone the wrong way, pushes back, calls the guy who is an idiot, and then like an idiot gets fired. So your way of doing things works. I just love the fact you've racked up some long tenures with folks who are like, woo, boy, Jeff, wow, good on you.
Well, you bring up a fantastic point that a lot of young engineers, I think, miss is race engineering. I've always said that race engineering is capital, big, 40 font race and little 8 font engineering, because you're there to race. Your job is to make the car go faster at whatever it takes. And if that is doing things for the sponsor or having a dinner at night with the car owner when you'd really be rather back at the hotel looking at data or talking to your drivers, it's really whatever it takes to make the car go faster. And I was fortunate enough to have, so maybe some of those guys, and I didn't really care what Andy Evans did or what Scott Tucker did. What I cared that they did is give me the budgets, the talented people, the technical freedom to do it the way I thought it should be done, and the resources to carry it out, and the directive to make them and their teams win races. They were super, those 2 guys, and even many other car owners, John Bennett the way right now, Tracy Crone, who I worked for 4 years. Those kind of guys were super committed to winning races and gave me the resources and tools to go do it. And man, from an engineering standpoint, you can't ask for anything more. A lot of guys are saddled with car owners and people that have, kind of conflicting or unclear goals. And, the guys I've worked for over the last 20 years, basically probably 4 people over the last 20 years have been ultra focused on one thing, and that's winning races. And that's you can't ask for anything better than that.
So to wrap here, your pathway, not unfamiliar by any means. You drove, you were able to learn, and I realize we're talking lower level, but regardless, you drove. That's something that, while there are some very successful race engineers who have never driven a race car, it's one of those things that if you're going to be a basketball coach, you want to have bounced a ball a couple times, hoisted up a couple shots, at least get it through the rim once or twice. Yeah. If you want to be a race car engineer, it is not mandatory, but I'll just say it's mandatory. You will have absolutely want to know what it is like to drive a vehicle around a motor racing circuit, to succeed, to not succeed, to try things. Hey, I'm going to go out and put in an extra 3 PSI in my front tires and see what it's like. And and then you find out, it's an understeering pig. Or again, who knows? But to try and dabble, those are the same things you will be doing when you're on a timing stand or whatever else, wherever else you might end up. Would also say that the mechanical side is very important. You will find more race engineers, older race engineers. Some of the younger ones, it's really fascinating to learn the different ways they've come in. But you look at a lot of the race engineers who've been doing it for a while, and I don't want to say they've necessarily been mechanics before they got there, but in many cases they have, and or their personal cars. There's something where I understand not only how to assemble this thing, but understand the systems, how things interact with one another and relate. How if I make this change here, or just that, how it's probably going to impact something diagonally across the car. Being someone who, and this is, I don't want to say more advanced, but it's definitely a benefit, as someone who owns and has owned his own setup pad for a really long time, boy, it's great if you can roll your street car on or a race car, whatever, actually sit on a setup pad, look at the numbers of what it's telling you about the corner weights, and to understand how the changes that you will make in ride height will work, what things look like when you forget to disconnect the anti-roll bars. When you get onto the setup pad, go, oh, oops, oh, well, hold on. Let me write down the numbers of the corner weights, then disconnect the bars and go, ooh, okay, now, interesting. That's why you always disconnect the bars first and make sure that you zero them before you reconnect them. And just some of these experiential items that don't involve being on pit lane during a track session, but actually turning wrenches, understanding the vehicle systems and basics, getting onto a setup pad and playing, tweaking. Really easy to get things wrong. Sometimes you need a veteran like a Jeff Braun or otherwise to help get you kind of to back out the mistakes that you made. But some of these things certainly help. The math you mentioned, the physics, the educational side, the ability to write, to be a good word writer, you'd be amazing. Jeff, tell folks how much time you spend after a race writing a report that goes out to drivers, team owner, your engineering staff, then also the pre-event material you'll write. It's ridiculous, right?
It is a lot of, there's a lot. I mean, this is going to sound, this is maybe a kind of a new event, but the first 2 days in my office after a race, well, the first thing I do is race day, when I get back to the hotel, and I'm usually flying out the next morning, I spend about 3 hours after the race writing what I call my technical review. And it has no numbers, it has no data, it has nothing. It's an Excel sheet with about 20 blanks and 20 lines and headings for each one. Camber, caster, toe, ride heights, aero, track grip, track bumps, TC, all the things, and I just start writing, and it's so that I can read that report next year, and it brings me right back into the moment. Why was I thinking this way? Why was I doing, camber? We changed this camber, and the driver said it did this, and oh man, I wish I would have tried this, or I should have started here, or I did this, changed the camber because I wanted this to happen, and it didn't happen. And so I can put down the notes of why I was thinking what I did and why I made those changes. And I nail that immediately when I get back to the hotel from the race, when the race is over. And then when you start back in the office, usually the next day, a travel day, then the next day. And now it is, this is unfortunate, but it's 2 days of BOP analysis. Our car compared to other cars, compared to our performance, compared to their performance, and their stint lengths, and their used tire performance, and all of that. And then I start into all of the things that we need to do from, usually it's the race coming up. I got to get a rough setup to the guys so they can build the car. We call it a build setup, which is like what geometry we're going to run, what gears we're going to run, what gearbox we're going to run, what dampers I want on the car. Not the specific maybe springs and ride heights and things yet, because I still need to work those out after I get some of the simulation results done. But the guys need to start, they're taking the car apart, and they need to start putting it together with the proper components for the next race on it. And then back to the reports again, databases of all the changes and reports to the engine people and the gearbox people of what we did, what we changed, all of that. My assistant engineer, Tyler, is working on mileage reports for the crew chief, Ian, who has to log in how many miles each wishbone, each axle, each gear did. So all of that's done. And then you start into the prep So that's 3 or 4 days, let's say, to finish up a race weekend. Then you start into the test plan and the tendency preview of what you expect to happen for the next race, and the parts and pieces that you need, alternate diffs and alternate shock absorbers that you need built, and all of that stuff. And you got to come up with all of that, and a test plan for the simulation, because we'll run simulations between races. So that's almost like a whole nother event. So you write a test plan, and we're going to try these 12 changes in the simulation. Then you get those results back, and you got to decide which ones you really want to try on the race weekend, and write your test plan. And then I do a big driver briefing PowerPoint, which is 30 or 40 slides that I do with the driver on the setup day, which kind of drivers get the complete briefing on what we're going to do, why we're going to do it, what changes we're going to do, all the things about the track, from where the pit cones, speed limit cones are, to particular tricks about the track, to where we are on pit lane and who's ahead of us and behind us, and all of that. So that briefing gets done, and then we show up on setup day, and away we go.
As my cat Rocky just joined the conversation to tell us that he wants to be fed, even though it's an hour and a half early, buddy. Sorry, pal. Gonna have to wait a little while. So, first of all, you just answered the question as to why you are so frequent in posting of coffee grinding and general coffee that is being produced. That is to keep you up because you are writing so many reports, preparing so many things. And again, reports can be things that happen, things that are coming up, could be in the form of that PowerPoint that you mentioned. There's the data entry, right, of your database. And yeah, again, this is for folks who want to do this on a truly professional and exceptional level. There is a little bit of a grind involved. And it isn't, it is more often than not, when you're away from the track for sure, having to sit in front of your laptop or a keyboard, whatever, and typety type. And you, although we love Rocky and want to feed him, having Rocky meowing and bugging you, or the kids saying, "Dad, play with me," or please go fix the garbage disposal that exploded. To think and process and do these things, you often need to try and wall yourself off a little bit. So it's great if you're single. It's just more of a challenge if you are husband, wife, whatever it is. So there's that aspect too. And, again, the ability to make cars go super quick on a racetrack, that's the byproduct and end result of a whole buttload of preparatory work and skills, one of them being underpinned by the ability to write and write that concisely and to convey your thoughts so you can digest them when you need, but also to share that with your team and whomever is going to be receiving these reports. So that's a big aspect as well. So it comes back to the education side, and you don't necessarily have to go to university to learn how to do all those things, but you will need to have those skills for sure. What else should we tell folks, Jeff, that if you want to get to be that and follow this road of learn the mechanical side, volunteer, repetition certainly helps, learn good word writing and data entry skills and such. I mean, that's, some software skills. I think most people have that today. What else should we tell folks?
I think the thing, because I get that questions from people in college about ready to graduate, and they want to know how to get into racing. And the advice I always give is, today, most places, especially in America, we're not designing race cars. Most race teams aren't designing race cars. So there's a few places that you can go in America where there's design work being done, but that's more rare now. So if you want to get on a race team, what I always recommend is most race teams don't have training kind of programs. Like, we'll bring you in and we'll teach you for a year, and you won't really help us at all for a year until you come up to speed, and then you'll start being beneficial a year from now. most race teams where you're going to get an entry-level job need you, you're hired, you walk into the shop the very first day, they hand you the laptop and the download cable and say, that car over there needs all the sensors zeroed, and for some reason the left front push rod load sensor is not working. I don't know if it's a problem with the wire or the strain gauge, but figure that out and configure the laptop so that all the Motec data works properly. We're going testing. The car's being loaded this afternoon, so have at it. And that's what you have to do. You have to produce immediately for these race teams. You have to be effective for what they need to get done. So how do you do that? You have to understand a little bit about racing, and whether that's, like you said, Marshall, volunteering at a SCCA level, or I don't care, at chump car level, at the go-kart track, or running your own kart, or anything like that, so that you're a, quote, racer. A lot of teams are hesitant to hire kids out of college who don't understand the long hours and the grinding and the drudgery and the no weekends off aspects of racing, because they don't want to hire a guy and he bails out after 6 months going, well, I can't even go to a movie with my girlfriend, and no, he probably can't.
And hey, by the way, here's a first class ticket to the next event in the fourth and final row of the Ford van. No, and I realize that the place we're going to race is many states away. It's 1,000+ miles. Guess what? It's a lot cheaper to throw $250 or $300 of gas round trip to get there than to spend $2,500 on plane tickets. So guess what? Enjoy the back of the van. That's again, we're talking IndyCar teams. We're talking IMSA teams. Granted, in some cases, teams can look forward to getting on that flight, and obviously going from Indy to California this weekend, or Florida to California, there's certainly flights involved. But yeah, I mean, as someone whose behind just became absolutely flat like everyone else's from just sitting in vans for Lord knows how long driving around. Again, there's the glamour, and we joke about this. Oh, we just do this for the glamour. It's being said with the highest degree of sarcasm, because for the most part, especially when you are younger or building your reputation, there's almost a let's see if they really want to do it. Let's see how much we can burn them out with the monotony and the lack of glamour. And if they're still here, then they really want it.
Then they're the guy. Exactly. It just kind of dawned on me. It kind of comes around to where we started this whole conversation. And it was not a big master plan or anything, but the reason I was fortunate enough, lucky enough to get hired by people is because I had a couple skills that were unique. I could do data before a lot of people could, and I could do shocks and understood them before a lot of people could. So I could actually help make race cars go faster for teams right away. And that's what I'm kind of saying right now. It still applies. They need you to make the cars go quicker and understand what racing's about. 15 years ago, people, I would say, okay, the one thing for sure you got to do in college is make sure you're on your Formula SAE team and be good at that, because people will look for that will make you stand out because you've been on Formula SAE. The long hours. How hard it is to do Formula SAE and still maintain your grades in your normal classes. And that was a thing that made kids stand out with potential race teams. Now, unfortunately, it's the baseline. You just have to have that. It doesn't make you anything special or stand out from any other of the 5,000 or 10,000 kids that also did Formula SAE. So you need to look for, something that makes you even more special or more able to help a race team on that first day. Formula SAE is great. Don't get me wrong. I mean, you're going to learn a lot. It's going to be hard. You're going to take a hit in your grade point average for sure. Everybody in racing understands that, but now that is almost like the price of just admission into the contest to get a job in racing.
Well, why don't we, Mr. Braun, move to our final topic, one being topical, heading into Long Beach this weekend.
Yep.
Let's discuss. So you're going to set up your race car to deal with a lot of traffic, and that isn't specific to Long Beach or street courses. You can certainly head to a natural terrain road course, even an oval, I'm sure, and deal with plenty of traffic. But since we have had folks say, hey, when Jeff is heading into a race weekend, could he give us some insights about what's unique from an engineering and setup standpoint there? Definitely the topic of not necessarily maximum attack crazy speed come that 100-minute race Saturday evening, but dealing with traffic, and then also maybe just setting up a car as well to handle in traffic, but also to peak towards the end of a stint. Those are two big things, but now not a 2 hour and 40 minute, 10, 12, or 24 hours. You got less than 2 hours to make that happen.
Yeah, it's always a shock going from a 24-hour race to a 12-hour race to a 100-minute race. The third race of the year is always like, oh, and things are going to happen fast, and you're going to be in traffic every lap. There's never like, oh, well, we got a clear lap or we got 2 laps clear. It will never happen at Long Beach. So there's some things from the setup standpoint that we can consider, things like, the easy things you always hear it in Formula One and IndyCar. Same thing happened with our sports cars. They're very aerodynamic dependent cars, and you get behind somebody and you lose front downforce. So the car is going to understeer. So, you'll try some things like you'll see cars running maximum front downforce things with like dive planes and big splitter extensions and anything they can do to make front downforce, because that turbulent air off the car you're following is not very downforce producing. So you need to stick more tabs and anything you can there to try to gain that downforce back. You may even run less rear wing to try to get the balance back, because you're going to be in traffic all the time, not have as much front downforce. So you may run less rear downforce just to get the balance of the car right.
Tip the center of pressure, further
Exactly.
where you need it.
Exactly. And then other things that are kind of secondary effects, but even things like gearing. You're going to get bogged down in corners because you're going to catch that GT car in the Queen's hairpin at Long Beach at the wrong spot right as you enter that, and you're going to be 4 miles an hour slower than you would be if you wasn't there. So then you'll actually make gearing choices based on the fact that you're going to be in traffic. For a single lap, the gear might be right, but for the other, out of a 70 lap race, 60 of those laps, you're going to be in traffic in that hairpin. So you need a different gear there to get out of that than you would in qualifying or on a clear lap. Same thing with brake ducting and radiator cooling. You get behind cars and you're behind them all the time. You don't get as much fresh air into the radiators, into the brake ducts. So your ducting blanking changes, which changes your aerodynamic drag, which means you might have to take some wing out of it to get the same top speed that you need. Traction control changes. Coming off of a corner behind a car when you're bogged down and you're slow, you're asking for more grip and more, you're more likely to spin the rear tires. So your traction control strategy might change. Your spring choice might change because you need that extra grip coming off the corner. Braking into corners when it's one thing to pull out and try to outbrake a prototype who's going relatively the same speed, but to pull out and find that right in front of you, there are 2 GT cars battling themselves, and they're side by side, braking into the corner in their own braking duel, and you're catching them, and you can't pass them because they've got the whole track blocked because they're too wide in the middle of the corner.
Of course.
And you now have to slow up an extra 5 miles an hour than you normally would because the GT cars aren't as quick and they're racing each other. So suddenly your braking ability in traffic becomes huge, and you might run different bias, different cooling, different master cylinder sizes even to get the braking that you need if you get surprised by a GT car. So, and we haven't, we can talk about strategy too, with traffic, but those are just the setup items that we would, that you at least need to consider when you run in a street race, Long Beach, Detroit, or a big traffic-y race.
I'd say the underlying mindset that I've always had, Jeff, when it comes to a setup on a street course and drawing from this traffic, it's going to be there. How do you deal with it? How do you give your drivers what they need, drivers what they need to succeed without hampering outright performance? To me, I think of trouble. So really, when I'm talking about what am I going to do for springs, anti-roll bars, and ride heights, and just everything, obviously you tend to deal with more bumps, awkward transitions, so the car is going to be sitting up a little bit higher than is maybe aerodynamically optimal, and so on and so forth. But really, when I'm thinking about what am I trying to give my driver, it is trouble avoidance and surprise reaction. So it's not just, hey, there's a bunch of cars, how do we get around them? It's, as you mentioned, what are they doing? Why did you brake that early? There's no reason. And all of a sudden your driver, 15 or 20 feet earlier than the norm, is having to climb on the binders and holy crap, hold on to the thing. And if you were to spring the car, set it up, if you were, say, for qualifying, where you have, by and large, the track to yourself, if you're having to jump on the brakes out of panic or dart hard left or right to avoid something with a setup qualifying on the car, you're probably going to spin and be in the wall. So come the race, and this is just a generalism, but come the race, you really are having to think of, my guys are going to get scared. There are going to be a couple of code browns for sure during this race because of some crazy thing someone else did that you would never expect and there's no reason for. But if I don't take account of that and accommodate somehow in the setup so that when they do have to take avoiding action, jump on the brakes, whatever, the car is not so stiff or overreaction that it's going to pop out and go around. I mean, that's, ultimately, I think a lot of what happens with race setups on street courses.
Absolutely. And I think it's different than like, okay, so we're going to be there with the Indy cars. Their considerations will be slightly different because they don't have, it would be like, think how their considerations would change if they decided to run the Indy Lights race and the IndyCar race together.
Yeah.
And then they would be passing the Indy Lights cars on a routine basis. And that's essentially what we have with the GTLM cars and the DPIs. I mean, we're going to be passing those, we're going to be lapping those guys every 10 laps maybe. And so they're racing their butts off, factory drivers. And I mean, it's a big deal to win those GTLM races. And those guys will not give a DPI car a break if they're battling. If it costs them 1/10 of a second on the car that they're trying to race to give a DPI car a break, they will just block that DPI car into the corner and you can't get by. And then you're stuck all around the fountain corners behind 2 GTLM cars. And now the DPI car you were racing is caught right up to you because that 3 car length gap you gained the lap before is just evaporated because these GTLM guys are blocking the heck out of you because they don't want to get passed by their own guys. And it becomes, we will actually set the car up so that we can pass GTLM cars better because that will get us a better result.
I love it. Well, why don't we save the strategy bit maybe when we're getting ready for Detroit, but let's close here since this was a topic and I don't want to keep pushing them back. It was one of last week's topics from a Long Beach standpoint, maybe chassis setup for the race to make sure that at the end of the limited number of stints in this very short hour and 40-minute race, setting up a car to peak towards the end compared to being the winner of the first 5 laps of the stint and then screaming and struggling and cursing at your race engineer for the rest of it.
Right. Well, and that actually comes down to as much the driver as it does the race engineer and being on the same page. You'll actually look at the strategy and decide when this race is going to be when it's going to be decided. And one thing you have here at Long Beach is that it's so hard to pass that there could be some thought given to the fact that if you can get ahead of that guy when your tires are good and maybe his aren't quite as good, then maybe you can hold them off. The other strategy, and it goes to the setup work too for late in the race, is, well, if I have better tires than he does at the end of the race and he's used his up to get ahead of me, I can pass him easily at the end of the race. So it's interesting to see how these races are decided, because if you're set up for a short run to get to the front and then try to stay there, you'll have other cars that are set up for a long run with better tires at the end of a run who might be trying to pass those guys. And so how would you do that? You want to save the rear tires is what it comes down to, because you're accelerating off of these slow corners. The front tires are not much of a problem from a wear standpoint and from a over usage standpoint. So you're accelerating off of 8 or so corners every lap hard, and it uses up the rear tires. So your traction control strategy becomes a big thing. Your driver modulation himself, how hard he's using the throttle, when he needs to use the tires and when he needs to save his tires, how he cools his tires off. Maybe he takes a lap or two easy and then he uses them real hard at the end. Your spring choice, how hard it loads the rear tire and uses it up. Your aerodynamic choice, how much downforce you put in it, or do you run less downforce and slide the rear tire and maybe overheat it? But it doesn't matter because you're fast on the straightaway and they can't pass you. But maybe the guy takes a lunge because he has a lot more downforce and it brakes better because he uses that drag and downforce to pass you. There's a lot of considerations in setup for how you're going to finish this race and how you're going to win this race, whether you're going to do it early and try to hold them off, or do it late and be better at the end. I don't think there's a right answer. I know for sure there will be different answers, and that's what's fun to watch, is see how it plays out in the first part of the stint and see how much it changes at the end of the stint or end of the race.
Well, as you just heard, I need to apply some more JB80 to my chair that was creaking mightily there, so apologies. Jeff, we can do this all day. That's the thing. You and I love talking about engineering. You and I just love trying to answer folks' questions in this discipline of the sport that has meant so much for the two of us. It's been your enduring career for decades upon decades. It was a not super long portion of my career, but something that I love and still love. But we should let you get back to work, because you are stopping work. I know you're living the high life there in a hotel in Burbank right now, coming in from a weekend engineering in Sebring of all places. But
correct.
We should let you get back to work so your core team can do well. What I don't want is your team owner, John Bennett, sending a drone strike in my direction because I was taking time away from you, helping your boys to hopefully have success this weekend. But thanks as always, my friend, and we'll look forward to speaking next week and grabbing some more great topics. Be sure to send them in, and we will get to them as quickly as we can.
It's fantastic. I always love it, Marshall. Let's do it again next week. I appreciate it, and we'll see you in a few days in Long Beach.
Greg Gill, awesome to have you back. Also awesome to have something brand new for the Blancpain GT World Challenge Americas series. Did I get that right? Because I usually get it wrong.
You got all of them in. Well done.
What? How crazy. Well, I love the fact that changing things up a little bit, instead of it being the regular and long-standing diet of GT cars coming in from, or GT3 base, but basically the World Challenge big bangers, if you wanted to call them that. We have their younger brothers and sisters in the form of GT4 coming to Long Beach here in a matter of days. Tell me about that decision. Where did this twist on the theme come in?
We found a lot of the GT3 drivers and some of the established teams like K-Pax very concerned with the crash damage that they got at St. Pete and Long Beach. And there, each year it was a concern. And of course, each year you would argue two of the largest races on the calendar, and you don't want to miss them. But they also got tired of multi-$100,000 repair bills. And when you're running multi-car teams, it was an area that we put to the teams last year at Lime Rock and said, as a GT3 team, where would you not want to race? And almost universally, I almost say 80% or so of the grid said, we can live without street courses. And we, on the same hand, as a business, cannot live without Long Beach. We're in our 30th year. Long Beach is 45, I believe, and we can't imagine doing business without them. So it was a natural. Last year we did the small GT3 field with and added in, I think, 7 or 8 GT4 cars.
Yep.
And we introduced it. And of course, people like Black Dog and others are no stranger to, racing at Long Beach. But there were many others who, it was something that it really caught their attention. So I think now with the GT4 grid that we have and the entry list that we have of 21 drivers, I think it's going to be a treat because we go old school, what everybody knew World Challenge for, single driver sprint format. No driver changes, no fueling. We're here. Let's get this thing done. 50 minutes. It's a drag race. So I'm really excited about it. And I'm particularly excited about the quality of the drivers that we have.
And I share in your enthusiasm for that, Greg, because this has been a long time celebration each year for World Challenge to come out to the West Coast for the street race, support the overall Long Beach Grand Prix. Tends to be some fantastic racing because of the general mindset. Shorter race, it's not the endurance format like we see with IMSA when they come out, even IndyCar with roughly 2 hours worth of competition there. Not saying that you have folks going psycho and saying, okay, let's destroy our GT cars, but just there's a little bit of a different mindset of, okay, we're not doing driver changes, we're not doing refueling. It's hardcore from the green flag to the checkered flag. I'm fascinated to see how this plays out as purely a GT4 event, though, knowing that we have pretty cool mix of cars, right? From the Panos, Avanzano, the Sin R1, McLarens, Porsches, got a KTM Expo, of course, Chevrolet Camaros, as you mentioned, Ford, what else? Porsche 719, Cayman GT4 CS MR. You might need to find them for coming in with that long of a vehicle name. BMW as well with the GT4. There's just a lot of diversity here.
GT4 R8 even. So it just an excellent combination of cars, and it's going to come down to, like you and I were talking earlier about the Barber IndyCar race, and not to step on the results there, so I won't say anything, but we know how you qualify there. Is a lot of how that race is going to work because it's tight, difficult to pass, and and unforgiving if something goes wrong. And I think that same thing can be said about Long Beach. So when you look at it, it's going to be, you think on one hand, the Mustangs and Camaros are going to have an opportunity. Well, these McLarens have been tuned up. You look through the cars, and I can't see a vehicle based on the performance we've seen so far in the first few rounds that has a distinct advantage nor a distinct disadvantage. And that leaves me a little nervous of like, wow, what's going to happen here? It's really going to come down to who gets the perfect setup. And it's going to be an exciting race.
Let's talk about a couple of aspects here, Greg, that I think will end up playing a role in the final results. First of all, we don't have the standard GT/GT3 driver rotation, which by and large, fully professional. So with GT4 being exactly what it's meant to be, something that is grooming in theory for those to jump up to GT3, at least, how the structure tends to work. We get more of a heavy leaning on the Pro-Am than full pro. You can look at the driver's list, and there are certainly some great pros in there, regardless of whatever their driver rating might be. No one would argue a Shane Lewis, Spencer Pumpelly, Matty Brabham, right? Great to see Matty back. James Safronis has been driving forever. And, again, Michael Cooper, there's all kinds of super high quality guys who would be perfect in any manufacturer-based GT racing, but there's also some really good AMs too, and some who are still learning. What kind of coaching, what kind of, I don't know if it's a message imploring folks to behave themselves in drivers' meetings, but, you know, we see the pros beat themselves up and bring out a lot of yellows quite often and tear up cars. What do you say to a group that isn't necessarily as well experienced as some of them as GT4 makes its debut?
I think there's, we do, and I think you used the right word. We implore to the people's better nacers and remind them that you've got, because of all the series going on, we only have one race. So you got to get it right the first time. You can't think to yourself, well, if I botch Saturday's race, I'll see how I do on Sunday. No, you got one shot at this. You're right before the IndyCar race on Sunday. You're putting on a show, and you don't want to, and we really do tell the drivers this because we've had a long-standing relationship with Long Beach. We know the crash fest that we had in 2015. None of us will forget that. And I think, what do we have, 12 minutes of green flag racing out of 50? It was just something awful. And we've never forgotten that. And we remind people, look, track limits here, no problem. The wall will give you the track limit. Things like that are self-disciplining, but you don't want people ruining their cars, and you want them to be able to be in at VIR in 2 weeks and have a good experience. And you remind them that you've got probably your largest in-person audience of the year, and you have an opportunity for your sponsors, for everything you're doing, for your points, and you can throw it away with a bad move. And the other side of it, and we're also selective, we've actually turned drivers down for this race that we feel don't have the discipline they've demonstrated in other times past by red flagging sessions and things.
I like that.
We've actually said no to some folks, and their names that and you would agree with the decision to do that. And it doesn't mean we don't like them or we don't like their money. It's the reality is this show is for everybody. And you've got to, in some ways, as much as you can't imagine a racer ever checking his ego out the door, he or she wants to win. But as it goes forward, you have to think about everybody there when you make that pass, when you're thinking about it. And it's great because we have Jack Baldwin, who was won at Long Beach. We have, he's the GT4 business manager. Jack can give people advice on what to do. And then you have the stalwarts like Michael Cooper, Tony Gaples, as you mentioned before, too. You've got James Sofronis, Matty, I think, has driven it in the trucks. I don't recall what he's driven on the sports car side at Long Beach. But again, most of the people there, Ian, James, they're going to be able to tell people, even like Bob McCallion, they're okay, this is what you got to learn at this track. Certainly Spencer knows that. Mark Clennon has raced it many times. So I think we get a pretty good maturity level for maybe the newer drivers like Samantha Tan, who are looking at it going, okay, this is the real deal. I don't want to mess this up at my home race. And they're really going to be focused.
Let's talk a little bit, Greg, about the value of Long Beach to this SRO-owned series now, knowing that over the years, World Challenge has been or felt like maybe the co-main event at times. And I know there's often been a Grand Am, ALMS. There's been a lot of endurance series that have come, but again, there have been years where, based on the strength or weakness of those endurance series at Long Beach, World Challenge has felt, at least to me, like it's really been one of the feature things being presented. With GT4 now, again, maybe not the fastest cars that folks will have seen from the series, but knowing that with IndyCar seemingly in a place of strength, IMSA in a place of strength, what's your general mindset of where GT4 America's, this World Challenge SRO product, where do you think it might fit in terms of value on the schedule? And also maybe share some thoughts to open on the value it presents to your team owners and drivers and sponsors, even if you guys aren't, say, the headlining part of the weekend.
No, that's a heck of a good question, and one that it's twofold. One, you don't want to we exist for our racers. Then we exist for our fans and sponsors. And so we go where they want to go. And certainly they look at Long Beach as an amazing opportunity. And so it was very nice when the GT3 teams were not as inclined to look at street circuits and really made it clear they didn't want to go back to have the GT4 guys literally step up from 7 or 8, non-points level people participating last year to 21 full point level people going this year shows you the interest on the GT4 side to do this, to stand out. And I know from the, 4 or 5 new teams that are coming, this will be their first time there, they'll get sold too. There's something very special about Long Beach. And I love St. Pete. I'm an unabashed booster of St. Pete. But it is the second professional race I ever attended as a teenager, in the second year of its existence. And what you have to count that against is drag racing and, flat track, motorcycle racing, speedway racing. So you can't really call those professional as compared to, going to Long Beach to an early Grand Prix the second year ever. And so I think there's people recognize that history and they want to be part of it. So in turn, for our business, and to speak from it strictly from a business standpoint, we want to continue to be part of it. We really appreciate the partnership, and we recognize that cars and models change, manufacturer goals change each year, but our teams and drivers are what really want to participate in this. And believe me, if I could find a way to grow and bring other classes of racing, like our touring car guys, can you imagine TCR cars at Long Beach? Oh my, that could be fun. So I would say for us and the SRO America aspect, let's figure out ways we can do more with Long Beach, not less. That being said, there is also an economics issue that we have to be very mindful of. When we bring 100 cars out to an event, like we'll have at VAR, like we had at COTA, that's much more cost effective for us with our staff and team, and it makes more sense for our sponsors as well. So it's something that we have to balance of when you do I think the important exposure level for your business by being at an IndyCar event, that's important to us. And I have said, and Jay and I have spoken about this on the IndyCar side, I'd like to see us do more involvement with IndyCar. Whether it's, with GT3, or I think it's quite likely to do GT4 and TC. I think you'll see more of that with us.
Well, you broached my last topic, which was, will there be any part of an assessment you would expect this weekend during the GT4 on-track activity to see if bringing out TCR content, and I'm a big fan of the little buzz bomb cars like that on street courses, because even though we're talking GT4 and not GT3, there's still a lot of V8 powered cars, big rumbling, very powerful machines. Those we see frequently. I'm a big fan of maybe putting content in front of folks that they wouldn't normally see. So that's why I think something like TCR could actually be a really big hit on the streets of Long Beach, if you think that could be a thing in the future. So if you can, maybe just give me a little bit on that. But the topic you just broached is one that's making my little heart sing, Greg, which is, could we get this relationship back to where somewhat of what it was between IndyCar and World Challenge, looking to co-promote and I should clarify, it's not because there was a falling out, right? It's not because there were problems. Absolutely. There was an intentional decision within the paddock to say, hey, let's try and do more on our own. But boy, I'd love to see sports cars and open wheel back together more frequently. From your lips to God's ears, Marshall, this is my desire. And while they were here in my hometown, I had some preliminary conversations about that. It is something that we feel strongly about. And I think that there's opportunity on both sides. And I like it because, since Barbara finished today as a good example, I can remember getting a fan letter, and that's when we ran all the cars there, and a guy had come out, and he came for open wheel, he came for IndyCar, but he loved the sports car show. And as he said, even them little cars, and at the time it was the TCB cars he was talking about, but he loved it. His kid had a great time. They just thoroughly enjoyed it. And I think that the beauty of sports car racing is we can recognize the brands, we can recognize the marks. And when you have something that is so diverse that, we're very, proud of saying that, more sports car brands race with us than any other series on the planet, that remains true. And I like that from a fan standpoint. Then where are the fans? Where are the big crowds? They're at IndyCar races. So why not have something where we can put ourselves there and tell the story? And I have gone on record saying,
I think it was a mistake for us to do the dramatic switch off that we did with IndyCar. We should have had a more gradual and maybe more thoughtful way, honestly, the way that we've been reapproaching it in 2019 and 2020. So I think you'll see a gradual reapproachment as it makes sense for their business, because they have Mazda, they have the different things they're doing. It's for them the same level of schedules and what things look like. So there's no guarantees, but certainly I think it makes sense for the fans, and I think our teams and drivers love it.
My friend, happy to hear the ongoing thinking, planning, and future diagramming that's going on within the offices there, and can't wait to see the GT4 cars on track here in just a couple of days at Long Beach. Thanks for making some time, Mr. Gill. Off to Long Beach we go.
Exactly. We'll see you there. And Marshall, can we get, even without an endurance race, could we get a mini disco ball? I mean, if we don't have a full one, can we get a mini one?
You've just given me a reason to jump back onto Amazon.com and see what else I can have ordered same day. Excellent. So I've got a job to do here.
See you there. Thank you very much, and appreciate being part of the series.
With Richard Dean above the pits at Paul Ricard. Glorious evening just before night practice, first day of the ELMS pre-season test. Richard, again, it's another spectacular display here from United Autosport. Multiple cars, multiple classes again. This is some effort, isn't it?
Oh, it's a spectacular display from the whole ELMS grid, isn't it? 18 LMP2 cars, and what is that, 42 in
41, total? I think, in
41
total.
In total. It's and the quality, the driver lineups and the teams. It's whoever wins this is going to deserve it in any of the three classes.
Now, it's been a bit of an odd lead into this one. Disappointment, I think you'd certainly acknowledge, with the Le Mans entry, just a single car for United despite 11 LMP entries across the ACO entry. What's your mood coming into this season?
With regards to the Le Mans entry or with regards to the ELMS season? Well, every time somebody brings up the Le Mans entry, the mood's not fantastic, because we got one entry because we won, which is an automatic invite, which means we didn't deserve we didn't deserve a second entry on merit. And this is the only way I can see it. I haven't had anybody point that out a different way, that maybe I'm looking at it a different way. So that's disappointment on the Le Mans entry. Nobody's quite explained it properly to me, or in a way I can understand. But what's my mood about the season? That it is what it is. We can only allow things we are in control of to get the better of you, and we've ploughed on in the preparation for this in the same way as normal. In fact, we've been trying to really dig a lot deeper. As you know, in all of these categories, there's very little margins that you're allowed to do. Everything's locked down in terms of homologation on the cars and regulations, and there hasn't been much movement that we've been able to find. So it's working away on the details, which just takes time, and that's another slight irritation that we had 4 months in Asia, which we could have had 4 months in Europe preparing for. But it's a big operation, and you touched on it earlier. It's a big operation from us, and we don't utilise, we don't cross people across each of the different disciplines. So the LMP2 team is independent. They work quite hard on our development program over the winter, and we're really quite positive. I think the first day of the test today has given us some encouragement as well.
It's again star-studded stuff. It's good to see Alex Brundle back in the United family this year with Ryan Cullen in one of the LMP2 cars. Phil Hansen, who's made spectacular progress in your hands, race winner twice at the end of last season, here with his two co-drivers for this season, because we've got Felipe Albuquerque at the test just for today, I think, and then he's off back to the States for Long Beach.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
And then Paul Di Resta, who'll be sharing the seat with Phil for race one. That's all well and good, but actually the growth this year isn't in terms of number of cars in this package. It comes with a step up to the WEC, but it also comes with a step up for your business with a move to a much bigger facility.
Yeah, WEC's a big thing for us, and we can't underestimate that, and it's looming pretty quick on the horizon now with what are we away? July for the prologue, so we have to be geared up and ready, and with duplicate kit and equipment, and we've got to figure out the staff, especially over that weekend at Silverstone, presents some problems, but we're thinking far enough in advance, and we're working away at it. A bit of head scratching at the moment, but we'll come up with the solutions. So yeah, the WEC's a big growth. We've got to get that right. I think we'll only get one go at that. We certainly can't make mistakes in the first year, and we intend to win races in that. And
I guess the obvious question to finish this one with is going to be about the plan for Le Mans next year to take, if you like, the decision out of someone else's hands. You've got to come back with success, and you've got plenty of opportunities to do that this year.
In terms of the entries for Le Mans, is that what you mean?
Yes, well, I mean, you'd like to, presumably.
I think, we get one automatic entry because of our WEC, and I would hope that we get an automatic entry because of all our participation in 3 cars in Michelin One Cup, 2 in LMP3 and 2 in LMP2. You would hope that that deserves one on merit, so I don't think anybody would be doing any favours by giving us 2 entries next year.
I think that's a fair assumption, really. Let's hope the weather stays like this for the rest of the week. Let's hope that you and I have as few grey hairs as we've got today at the end of the weekend. Richard Dean, for now, good luck for the weekend coming.
Yeah, thank you.
With Roman Rusinov in the G-Drive Racing garage, and of course reigning champions in the European Le Mans Series, but there's a big change this year, Roman. It's an Arus.
Exactly. So this year we will race on Arus 01. So what is Arus? Arus is a new brand, automotive brand, who's making limousines. The main presentation, the first European presentation, was in the Geneva Motor Show. So I think it's quite an exciting project for all of us, because now we have Arus 01, which is a Russian car. We have a Russian team. So I think, we have good ambitions. We have good drivers, and I hope we can fight for a win again.
It's a first step into motorsport from the Arus brand. I mean, probably known internationally most for being the state limousine of your president, Vladimir Putin. But this is a brand now with some international ambition.
I think what is important to say is that, first of all, it's a good car.
Yeah.
So it's probably a good competition for Rolls-Royce. And I believe the worldwide will appreciate it. It's already appreciated quite a lot, but now we entering the motorsport, and I think what is the best for an automotive or automobile brand, it's racing. I think everybody did it. Bentley, Mercedes, Toyota, Audi, Ferrari, Porsche. So in the end of the day, for sure, the best association of a new automobile brand, I believe it's racing. And if we have R01 with us, that means they believe it as well.
It's an Arus 01, and in common with what we've seen before with Alpine as a developing and emerging brand, it is of course it's a rebranded ORECA, but that's a good thing. It's a car that you've won races and won championships in. It's the 01. What might we be expecting in years to come with the 02?
I think first of all we must prove that we can win races this year. I think it will be the first step to understand what is racing for them, to see how good it is, and how huge the marketing will be in Le Mans. I think the Le Mans is the main race, it's the biggest race in the world. 500,000 people coming, so it's a great event. It's a great brand, I think everything is together now. I have G-Drive Racing, which is quite well known in motorsport. We won 4 championships in a row, so we try to win another one. And also, it's never easy. It's always very hard. But it's the beginning year. It's important to put everything together. Good mechanics, good drivers, good engineers, to work well in the pre-season. And I think we did already quite an amazing job. And we're happy that we're here with Arus. So that's great.
Now, for our audience, tell us a little bit about the G-Drive brand. It's from memory. It's gas stations.
G-Drive is a premium fuel which is sold at Gazprom petrol station. We're presented in Russia, in Serbia, in Kazakhstan. So it's quite popular in Russia. We have more than 1,600 petrol stations. Wow. And G-Drive fuel is a fuel #1, branded fuel. I mean, it was 98. Now we did 100. We have also 95. So yeah, it's quite popular. It's brand number one, also because of racing, because I think we really test fuel on the LMP2 car, so it's proven, so it's a very good fuel, even if it's coming from the normal petrol station. A race car can make the same lap time that with a race one, so I think it's quite important to say that.
We've seen in recent years a number of Russian brands and Russian drivers breaking through into international European racing in particular. You've been around with us for a long time. You've got your good friends, I'm sure, down at S&P Racing as well. Tell us a little bit about how much awareness of motorsport there is across Russia, and in particular, how much of an impact this kind of effort makes.
I think what is important to say that the motorsport start with the first Russian racetrack, which was Moscow Raceway. Then we get Sochi. So I would say it's the beginning of motorsport. It's still not as big as we would like to have it, because it's quite a difficult sport. But what we're trying to achieve now, what we're doing now, it's already very positive. I think we get a very positive feedback in world press about R01 in racing. I think it's good. So now R01 arrive in Le Mans. Brands like Porsche, Audi, Bentley, everyone was doing it. So I think it's quite cool that we're here with a powerful engine, and I like that it's not electric. I like that it's
real motorsport.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, G-Drive is premium fuel, so we need to burn fuel for it.
Absolutely.
So we love cars with big engines, which makes a lot of sound, big noise, and a lot of fire from the exhaust.
So we have you as a championship-winning driver. We have the team as a championship-winning team. We have Arus as a brand new brand to us internationally, but clearly this is all designed now to stimulate interest and pride in this team across your nation and beyond.
I think what it's not what I have to say. I would say everything what about G-Drive Racing and me as a driver. So I think you're going to say, okay, about nations, this is a different story. I don't want to go with the politics or stuff like that. So I think from our side, we're just happy to see the Russian flag everywhere, and I'm happy to see the Russian flag on the podium on my race car, and I'm happy to see a lot of different Russian brands present in motorsport.
Internationally,
I think this is the most important point, and in the main race of the world. I think Le Mans is the greatest event in the world, not just a race, it's the greatest event, and National Geographic said it already.
Absolutely.
But also what is important that we say that so I think what is important is to say that G-Drive Racing is really present in motorsport from long time, and we already built a very great image around G-Drive, around Russian team, and let's continue this way.
Final question from me. You've been on the top of the podium many times, WEC, here in the ELMS. I think you'd like to be back in that World Championship and back on the top of that podium, but there's a big step financially there too, isn't there?
Yeah, for sure. I would. Definitely, we would love to do WEC. I think it's a great championship. Yeah, we need to sit down. Let's do ELMS in the great conditions, and then to see if we can come back in WEC. I'm already working to go in Bahrain, maybe in the end of this year. So this will be already a good step. So let's see if we can make it.
Good stuff. For now, good luck this weekend with round 1 of the ELMS coming up here at Paul Ricard Circuit in the south of France. Let's hope the weather stays well for us.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
And that was Inside the Sports Car Paddock with our friends Jeff Braun, Greg Gill, Richard Dean, and Roman Rusinov. If you have any suggestions on guests we might have on next week or in the coming weeks, be sure to drop me a note on good old social media. And also for the topics that Jeff and I start off with every week, if there's anything that interests you, anything you're curious about from an engineering, race strategy, setup, whatever it might be standpoint, more on the technical side, don't hesitate to send those notes in as well to myself and Jeff, and we will not only add them to the list, but we will look forward to marking them off and getting that discussion to you in a future episode. All right, I'm Marshall Pruitt. This is the Marshall Pruitt Podcast, brought to you by Cooper Tires and the Justice Brothers. Thank you for listening.